what is a woman from Scotland doing in Miami running the Latin American business of a major US bank? Not entirely obvious, probably a little unusual. And so, as Susan said, it might be helpful for some of you to hear a little bit about my personal story and how on earth I got into this role and this situation. As Susan said, I'm a working mother. I always joke with my team and say I have 3 boys at home. I have a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 59-year-old. And the oldest one, my husband sort of says he feels the same way. It's mutual. I'm the same as many folk around the table. When I'm looking at my this evening, I've got to go and grab my son's toothpaste on the way home. He's run out. When I'm on the road, I'm worrying about whether my husband's making sure that he's having some greens in the evening diet for the family, and they aren't just having pizza in their boxers watching the game on television. It's a fairly normal home life for me. But I'm often asked, can you have it all? Can you do it all? And I say, yes, you can, but you can't do it all at once. And don't expect everything at once. So let me talk you through one piece of advice I was given by one of my bosses one point, which kind of took the pressure off me. And he said, your career is going to be decades. If you're at home all the time, you might be there with your family. Well, that's going to be a pretty active period if you've got a large family or if you're working. But your life is going to have several careers. So take the pressure off yourself about expecting to do everything at once. When I look back at my career, my earlier days, I started off at Goldman and M&A, and I felt like I worked in those first 2 years about four or 5 years worth of working. It was very intense. I learned an awful lot. But I then moved to Spain because I was working in London, and I was the boring British girl in London, and everyone else was much more exotic from all over Europe. They're a little bit older than I was. They spoke multiple languages, and I just thought they were so much more interesting than I was, that wouldn't it be fun to go and work in Europe for a little while and learn another language. And I was younger. I started at Goldman when I was 20, so I was also the baby. And I was trying to decide between Germany or Spain, and this was back in the early late 80s. And I just thought Spain would be so much more fun than Germany. It wouldn't be fun to live in Madrid, and it was a bit more exotic, and that was literally the driver of my decision, was that would probably be more entertaining, more fun to be in. And it ended up being a very good decision from a language point of view. And then after working in Spain for a couple of years, and Goldman helped me get a job there, and I asked my bosses, help me find a job in Spain. I thought the US would be fascinating. I know it's this machine that I was somewhat entranced by understanding. So I went to business school in the States. And then I thought about going back to Goldman. I'd loved it there. I thought the caliber of the people, it was a partnership in those days. It was a while ago. But, there were so few women there. There were so few women in financial services, and those who were rather scary. It was the days of wearing these big padded shoulders, dressing practically like a man, or in these suits that were horrendous. And none of them were that happy. The women who were more in their late 30s, and many of the men, really just didn't have much of a life. They were very successful, they were brilliant, but it was tough. And I didn't want that. But I still wanted a professional career that was fulfilling. But, I kind of hoped I would have a husband and have time to go out on a date, and that I could actually turn up for one rather than having to cancel and all those different things. So I joined McKinsey. So it's not exactly a walk in the park, but there was just a bit more predictability than working in M&A. And I felt it was still the same thing. You were trying to be a trusted advisor to a client. You're building those same sorts of institutional relationships, but it was just going to be a little easier. And I did successfully and happily get married. And then when I became partner, against all the advice I was given, I planned on getting pregnant the year I was in the run-up to partner. Everyone said, oh, don't be so stupid, but I thought you can't just lead your life that way. So I was told I was partner at McKinsey 2 weeks after I'd given birth. I remember getting the phone call from my boss and just thinking, would he please just get off the phone because I've got to feed the baby, I've got to get the food. And it was sort of chaos around. I'd say, that's lovely, lovely, thank you very much, goodbye. And my husband thought I was a bit crazy. I was trying to cope with being a new mother. And then I worked part-time for the entirety of my partnership at Citi, at McKinsey. So that was, I was there for about 5 years. My husband was running the US division of Bank of America, sorry, the European division of Bank of America. He was pretty busy. And I know I was a partner. And so we said, okay, I wanted to be around for the kids. A bit more. And I wanted to have a bit of balance. I knew if I was at home all the time, I would drive everyone bonkers. And so there was a happy medium of working part-time. And it was tough from the point of view of my own ego. You're used to people who you trained up suddenly became more senior than you after a certain amount of time because I was on a 60% program. But I have to tell you, I learned a huge amount through that shift. I first of all think it humanized me. There is nothing like having children to bring you firmly back down to the ground and to sort of understand where your priorities were. And I was that geeky person that was the super analyst. I would crunch the numbers longer and better than anyone else. I would have the longest project list. I practically had a project plan for absolutely everything that was going on. And suddenly you no longer have time for that. And you can't do everything at the level that you're comfortable at, and you have to start learning how to do 80-20. And that really was a game changer for me. And it was about the same time that my boss sat me down and said, look, you're used to being the one that's done all the work, but you don't talk enough. My husband finds this astonishing today. And to my team members, they said, you've got to learn. It's not good enough just to have done all the work. You've got to learn how to influence the debate and the dialogue in the room. And that's your job. And I've always hated standing up and talking or pushing a point of view. I felt very self-promoting. But when he said it's your job, I suddenly felt, it's not about me, it's about doing a good job. I can do that now. And that's what gave me part of the comfort to be much more assertive in many areas and to begin to learn how to influence a room rather than just doing it by influencing people behind closed doors, of persuading them on arguments and doing it more in a personal way, but how to do it more broadly. And so that advice from my mentor, one of many I've been lucky to have, was very, very helpful in getting me to change my game. And then after the kids were at school, I then decided I was going to go back full time. And instead of advising people on doing things, I wanted to go back and actually get involved in a business and not just be the advisor. And so I joined Citi. And I joined Citi because I love global organizations. It's what I loved about McKinsey as well, was the globality of the place and diversity. And I've been at Citi 12 years, and I've moved into 5 different roles. And they're ones where I'm not comfortable unless I'm 120% prepared for something. And my immediate default is to say I'm not good enough. And I'll give you an example. When I was running the private bank, I got a letter at home inviting me to play golf with Tiger Woods as part of his foursome because he was looking at Citi to support the foundation that he had, and that would we come and talk about it, and this would then be televised. And I'm from St Andrews in Scotland. I'm okay at golf, but my immediate reaction was, I'm not nearly good enough to do that. It was that sort of fear of I might kill someone off the first tee if the ball was shanked, as it sometimes does. And it took my 11-year-old son to say to me, why are you worried about this, Mum? No one's going to be watching you. They're going to be watching him. No one's going to care about how you play. And then for the rest of your life, you can say you played with Tiger Woods. But it was that default reaction. I thought, God, after all these years, and this is in my 40s, and my default reaction is still, I can't possibly do that. I'm not good enough because I'm not going to be perfect at it. And it was another one of those ones you say, oh, what I've learned at Citi. My first job was working the corporate investment bank, and I was helping part of the global management team there. And then the crisis started beginning to look as if it was going to hit in '07. And the CFO of Citi called me up and said, come and see me in New York. I was living in London. And he said, I'd like you to consider being the head of M&A and strategy for Citi itself. Got a crisis coming up. We need a strong strategist in, and you've got some M&A background from your Goldman years. Come and play this role. And it was one where it took one of my friends who I was working with at Citi to say, my immediate reaction, I can't do that. I'm not good enough to do this. To say, why wouldn't you just go for it? Give it a shot. And so I did, and through the crisis years ran all of the, for a woman who likes shopping, I just sold things. But we did the massive restructuring of Citi. We literally sold about almost $1 trillion worth of assets. It was a huge restructuring, about over 100,000 employees that we moved into businesses that we then sold. And it was an extraordinary time, and I learned a huge amount. But my life, I was commuting because my husband was at that point also running a bank in Europe. And so he said, okay, one of us has to give up now. And he's older than me. And he said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to go and do something different. He said, go for it. So I went and plucked up the courage and spoke to my boss, Vikram, and said, okay, either I need to move to New York to carry on doing this job as I was commuting, or take a chance on me and put me into a operating role. And so they gave me the private bank to run globally. And turn that around, which is a wonderful job. You get to meet. It's a job that's very humbling. You get to meet, the most successful entrepreneurs around the world, and so by definition, your client base is more successful than you would ever dream of being, in their careers. And it's a wonderful part of our business. And after 4 years, I got a phone call from my boss saying, okay, we'd like you to move from London, from running the private bank, and the private bank at Citi serves a third of the 4 billionaire list. We'd like you to move to St. Louis, Missouri, to run and turn around and fix the mortgage business. So I remember turning up for the first day in St. Louis. And it dumped the Chanel suit, and I was in jeans and the local baseball team, the Cardinals baseball shirt, to turn up for work and do a town hall to 12,000 people. I'd never run a business with more than 2 or 3. We had 22,000 people, and take on changing, an operating business that could not have been more different. And then that was another one where I took a plunge. And why I did that, everyone thought I was completely nuts, because the private bank's such a wonderful business and the mortgage is kind of the scourge of the earth in the States at the time. I knew I would grow. I was going to learn a completely different skill set and test myself. Could I run a factory business? Could I run a big operating business? And there are certain things about how do you treat people, what do you do? And it was a business I knew nothing about. I hadn't known a lot about private banking. What do you learn? You learn that you get people who are far better than you on your team. And that's one of the things I've always been very comfortable of, is going out and finding people who are much better than I am, and making sure they're part of your team. And never being threatened by that, and recognizing you've always got people that are strong successors, and then helping them succeed. And surprise, surprise, that means if another great opportunity comes up, you are able to move, because no one's sitting there saying, well, we don't have anyone who could take over from you. But, also unsurprisingly, if you can get a team of really strong individuals to perform well, then, you're going to be very successful yourself as a result. And that takes a bit of courage. And then took on the Consumer Commercial Bank and now into Latin America. And it was kind of the same drill. I remember going down to Banamex, which is a very big bank in Mexico. And the Mexican colleagues have never had a foreigner running the National Bank of Mexico. They've certainly never had a woman. My husband is Cuban. He understands, he's done a lot of work in Mexico over the years. And he said, okay, we're going out. This was a Saturday before the Monday I started and the announcement came. And he said, we're going out and buying you a Banamex red dress. We're getting you a high pair of heels. You're going to the hairdresser and you're going to stride onto that stage with confidence. And you'll be yourself, but take it on, but just be yourself. Don't try and out machismo anyone, but be yourself and no one will quite know what to do, and then you can just get on with it. Very good advice. So through my career, I've had people who've really helped me get over this, take risks, try different things, turn disadvantages into advantages, turn this fear of doubt into a motivator to work harder or be prepared. Taking, when you're sitting there saying, I'm not good enough, then you get yourself more comfortable by working hard and getting the things done, and really relying on great mentors. And the final piece of advice I'd say is, again, something I learned at McKinsey. You've got 3 types of mentors, because it's always hard. You have a mentor. What does that mean? And there's 3 different roles mentors can play, I've found. One is the person that's going to give you that really good advice. Like my one who said to me, you need to learn how to influence the room. Or some of your other friends will say, you're not doing yourself any favors on this. The ones who'll give you the hard advice, it's rarely a boss. It's usually someone you've worked with. It's usually a peer or a friend, or it may even be someone who you work with who will provide that really honest feedback. Make sure you've got that group of people who'll do that. Second piece is, who are the folk who are going to provide you access to opportunity? And that's a much broader network. That's why I say always be nice to everyone. And when someone asks you to do a favor, do that favor, because they may find opportunities that they suggest that you do. And I was suggested to the head of the CFO at Citi by someone I'd worked with at McKinsey. All the different roles I've had, someone suggested me. I've never put my hand up for them except the private bank situation. And they said, oh, what about Jane for that? Just because I tried to help people all throughout the career, and they've been very kind on it. So have access. Who's going to give access to opportunities for you? And the third one is people who'll take a bet on you, right? Who are some of the folk who'll say, okay, it's not an obvious choice to do this, but let's put Jane into this, either because they think you've got a skill set that's valuable for it, or because they think it'll be good for your development. And those are the 3 things just to think of about mentors. Do you have those people? And make sure that that's part of your network, and that you're also providing likewise. And no matter how junior you are, you can be that person providing the feedback to help all of us, because we're all in it together.